I have watched the video 47 times. I know it is 47 because I counted, in the same methodical way I used to count inventory at the hardware distribution center in Perth before I retired, and the counting is the kind of thing you do when you are trying to understand something that has become unfalsifiable. The video is 11 minutes and 22 seconds long. It was taken on a Thursday in March 2024 at a council chamber in the Melbourne suburb of Moonee Ponds, and in it, a woman in a blue dress stands in the fourth row of 15 plastic chairs and says the words of the Australian Citizenship Oath after a registrar in a grey suit, and when the anthem plays, she sings it, quietly, with her eyes forward. She holds a small Australian flag on a stick, the kind they hand out at the door. At one point, at 7 minutes and 4 seconds, I know the timestamp the way I know my own phone number now. She turns her head slightly and looks for me in the row behind her, and I am there, visible at the edge of the frame, and she finds me and smiles, and the smile lasts about 2 seconds before she turns back to the front. The separation conversation happened on the 14th of April 2024. 42 days later. My name is Colin. I am 67 years old. I grew up in Perth, and I have spent 14 months trying to read that 2-second smile the way a man reads a document he is not sure is what it says it is. I am going to tell you about the day of the ceremony, because the ceremony is the story, and the story is the smile, and the smile is the thing I cannot resolve, and if you have come to this channel for resolution, I am the wrong episode. Let me give you the facts first, in the order they happened, because facts are the only thing I am sure of anymore. I want to give you the facts first, in the order they happened, because facts are the only thing I am sure of anymore. I should start 2 years earlier, because this story does not begin in Chiang Mai. It begins in a bedroom in Wembley, Perth, in August 2012, when Helen died at 5 in the morning, with her hand in mine. And the 5 years between that morning and the cooking class in Chiang Mai are the context for every decision that follows. Helen and I had been married for 29 years. She was 54 when she died. We had built the hardware distribution business together. She ran the accounts and I ran the operations, and the business ran us for 22 years, and the running was a good kind of running, the kind that fills a life in the way work fills a life when you are doing it with the right person. After she died, I sold my half of the business to my partner, and I did not know what to do with myself, which is the sentence that describes the next 5 years in full. My son Nathan was in Melbourne, my daughter Sophie was in Geelong, and they were attentive and kind and grown, and the Wembley house had 5 rooms and I used perhaps a fifth of one of them. I went to a men's grief group at the community center on Wednesday evenings for about a year, and the men there were useful and decent, and we have mostly lost touch, and the grief group helped, and also didn't help in the way that all help helps and doesn't help. In 2016 I was 60, and I booked the Chiang Mai trip because a man at the grief group had mentioned it twice, and I had nothing else in the diary for those weeks, and I needed something in the diary. I met Malie in 2016 on a trip to Chiang Mai. She was 36, from a village outside Phrae, had been working in a guest house near the Sunday market for 4 years, divorced from a Thai husband in 2013, a daughter named Dao, who was 11 at the time, and lived with Malie's mother in Phrae. We met at a cooking class. I know how that sounds. There are worse ways to meet a person. And we talked over shared cutting boards for 3 hours, and she laughed at my knife technique with the specific warmth of someone who finds incompetence genuinely charming, rather than performing the finding. I went back to Perth. We messaged for 4 months. I went back to Chiang Mai in January 2017 for 3 weeks. And by the end of those 3 weeks I was 60 and she was 37, and we both understood that something was happening that was bigger than a holiday. I want to give you the immigration timeline, because the immigration timeline is everything in this story, and because I have since learned that most men in my situation could not have told you the dates, and I always could. I am a man who reads forms carefully. The partner visa, subclass 820, lodged November 2017. Granted temporary residence December 2018, 13 months. The bridging period, during which she lived with me in my house in Wembley, Perth, while we waited for the permanent stage, February through October 2019. Permanent residence, subclass 801, granted October 2019. The citizenship pathway requires 4 years as a permanent resident. So, October 2019 to October 2023 at minimum, with the application lodged November 2023 and approved in February 2024. The ceremony assigned March 2024. I am telling you these dates because they are the dates I sat with for weeks after the 14th of April, laying them next to the marriage's temperature, the way a detective lays evidence on a table, and I will come back to what I found. We married in February 2019, during the bridging period, at a registry office in Perth, with my daughter Sophie and my son Nathan and Mali's friend Juan, who had flown from Bangkok. It was a small ceremony, and I remember standing there in a hired jacket next to a woman who had learned to make Vegemite toast without being asked, because she had noticed I ate it every morning, that I had arrived somewhere I had not expected to arrive. I had been a widower since 2012. My wife Helen died in August of that year. Pancreatic cancer, 7 months from diagnosis, and the 7 years between her death and the registry office in February 2019 had been livable years, the years you live rather than inhabit, and standing next to Mali in that room, I felt the difference between the two. That is the ground this story stands on, and I will not apologize for it being soft ground. The Melbourne move was my idea, and I want to be clear about that. Perth had been home for 30 years, but it was Helen's Perth more than mine. The friends, the neighborhood, the particular suburb that carried the particular weight of a life I had been living as a remainder rather than a life. Maylee had settled in Perth readily but without attachment. She was learning English at a community college. She had found a Thai community in the northern suburbs. She had a part-time job at a Thai grocery in Osborne Park that she did not need for the income, and that she went to 3 days a week because she liked having somewhere to go. When Nathan mentioned, at a family dinner in late 2019, that his firm was moving him to Melbourne and that the move might be an opportunity for us as well, I watched Mali's face when I raised it, and she said, "What would you want?" And I said, "A change." And she said, "Then let's change." We moved in March 2020, into the pandemic, which was not the timing we had planned, but then no one planned anything in March 2020, and the timing meant we were together in a new city, in a lockdown country for 8 months, which is either the best or worst way to test a marriage, and which I have since concluded was mostly the best. The Melbourne years, 2020 through 2023, were the years I want to protect most, because they are the ones the calendar argument attacks most directly, and because they were, in large stretches, genuinely good. I want to tell you about the Perth years first, the 18 months between the visa grant and the Melbourne move, because they are the years that I think about now, with the most ambiguity. She moved into the Wembley house in December 2018. The temporary visa came through on the 16th, and she arrived from Chiang Mai on the 23rd, 3 days before Christmas, and I had put up a tree, because it seemed like the right thing to do, and she stood in the hallway, with her 2 bags, and looked at the tree, and then looked at me, and her face had an expression I have never been able to name, but which I understood to be the face of someone arriving at the end of a long journey, who is not yet sure if this is the right destination. I wanted to say something, and I said, "It's a real one. The tree. I drove to Kalamunda for it, because apparently when I am nervous, I explain my procurement decisions." She said it was beautiful, and she meant it, and then she went upstairs and put her bags in the room I had set up for her, which she moved from into the main bedroom about 6 weeks later, unremarked, by mutual agreement that required no words, which is the way things happen between us at their best. Helen's things were still in the house. This is the fact I have held most carefully, because it is the one that tells 2 stories most directly. I had not cleared Helen's wardrobes. The photographs were on the wall. There was a mug she had bought in Broome in 2009 that still lived in the cabinet, cream with a blue stripe, and I had never moved it, because moving it felt like a statement I wasn't ready to make. Mali found the mug on about her 2nd week and washed it and put it back in the cabinet without comment, and I registered this as generosity, and I still register it as generosity, and I also now register it as the act of a woman who understood what she was managing, and those 2 registrations are not contradictory. Helen's wardrobes she did not touch. In April 2019, 2 months after we married, I cleared them myself, and I told Malie I was going to do it before I did. And she said, "Whatever you need," and I did it. And Malie offered to make tea when I came downstairs, and I accepted. And we sat at the kitchen table, and she said nothing, and I said nothing, and the tea was the right temperature. The Melbourne years, 2020 through 2023, were the years I want to protect most. The Coburg terrace house, where we lived for 3.5 years, is the version of us I return to most. Not the Perth years, where we were still establishing things, and not the ceremony, which is the day I keep examining. The Coburg years, when we had stopped establishing and had started simply being. The routine that forms around two people who have agreed to share a life is not romantic and is more intimate than romance, and I want to describe it honestly. She did the washing on Mondays and I put it out because she found the Hills hoist confusing, which was partly true, and partly, I think, a division of labor she had engineered, because she correctly identified it as one of those domestic tasks that a man can contribute to without endangering anything. I did the bins. We shared the cooking in the way that couples share things when one of them is significantly better at it. She cooked and I assisted, which meant I chopped things and was told where I had gone wrong. And I did not go wrong in the same place twice, and she noticed that. On Sunday mornings I brought her coffee in bed, because she preferred to wake slowly, and she drank it reading something on her phone, news in Thai, occasionally something in English, and she would tell me things from it. Something happening in Bangkok, a Thai celebrity she found funny, a piece of Australian news she wanted to explain to me from the position of someone learning the country, which was sometimes clarifying, and sometimes the most Thai version of a thing I had ever encountered. Those Sunday mornings are the detail I protect most fiercely from the calendar argument, because nothing about them was strategic, and I know strategy, and I know Sunday mornings, and they were Sunday mornings. We found a rhythm in Coburg, where we rented a terrace house with a backyard in which Malie grew Thai basil and spring onion and a chili plant that produced more than we could use. She cooked most evenings, and I washed up, and we watched Thai dramas on the laptop because she had been following one since 2019, and I had, somewhere around episode 30, become invested in it. Nathan and his wife Maya came to dinner regularly, and Maya and Malie had developed, across 2 years, the specific friendship of two women who are both managing the experience of being in a family that was partly assembled before they arrived, and who have found that they have more in common than the assembly history. Dao visited from Phrae in the summer of 2022, 16 by then, and she was a quiet, serious girl who sat in our kitchen for 2 weeks doing homework in Thai and eating Molly's cooking and responding to my attempts at conversation with the patient tolerance of a teenager who has been told to be polite and who is, just barely, managing it. I liked her very much. I still think about her. I want to tell you about the citizenship preparation, because the preparation is the detail the video doesn't show. She studied for the test, the Australian Citizenship Test, 20 questions about history and government and values, for about 6 weeks. She used a study guide she ordered online, and a set of flashcards she made herself, and she quizzed me on them at breakfast in the way she had quizzed me on Thai drama plot points, with the same mixture of genuine investment and mild amusement at my performance. I failed the practice test the first time I tried it. She passed the actual test on the 28th of January 2024 with a perfect score. I want to say that clearly. She studied harder for the right to be Australian than most people who were born here would, and the knowledge she accumulated in those 6 weeks is probably still in her head, accurate, and I do not know what to do with that fact. The invitation for the ceremony arrived in February 2024. The date, Thursday the 7th of March. The location, the Moonee Ponds Council Chamber. The dress code, smart casual. It said, on the invitation, that up to 2 guests could attend, and I booked 2 places, myself and Sophie, who drove up from Geelong for it. We met at the council car park at 9:15. Maylee was wearing the blue dress, which she had bought the previous Saturday at a shop in Brunswick where we sometimes went on Saturday afternoons, and she had the small bag she kept for occasions, and she looked, standing in a council car park on a Thursday morning in March, the way people look when they have been waiting for something for a long time. I said that. I said, you look like someone who has been waiting for this. And she said, yes, I have. And there was something in the how she said it that I replayed afterward, and that I am replaying now as I tell you. And that remains exactly as readable now as it was then, which is to say, completely. Inside, the chamber held perhaps 60 people and their guests across 5 rows of chairs. Let me give you the morning properly. We left the Coburg house at 8:45, which was earlier than we needed, because Malie does not arrive at things late. She had checked the transit 3 times on her phone the previous evening, and established that the drive was 22 minutes without traffic and 42 with, and we left at 8:45 because she had decided, without discussing it, that 42 minutes was the relevant number. I drove. She sat in the passenger seat and did not say much, and the not saying much was the concentrated kind, the kind that comes from thinking carefully about something rather than having nothing to think about. I asked if she was nervous, and she said a little. I asked what she was nervous about, and she said she did not want to forget the words, and I said she would not forget the words, and she said she knew, and we drove the rest of the way in the concentrated silence. Sophie was waiting in the car park in a pink coat she had bought in Melbourne the previous year, and that suited her in a way I had not expected, and she and Malie did the greeting that they did, which was not a hug exactly, and not a hug, a thing that had evolved between them over 5 years of Christmas dinners and birthday lunches, and the specific negotiations of women who are important to the same man, and who have decided to make that work. Sophie said, "You look beautiful," and Malie said, "Thank you," and Sophie said she meant the dress specifically, and the day in general, which was the kind of thing Sophie says when she is feeling generous, which she was. Inside the chamber, the registrar explained the proceedings before they began, the order of the oath, the anthem, the flag presentation, the morning tea afterward in the lobby where there would be, he said with the careful enthusiasm of a man who has said this sentence 400 times, Lamingtons. There was a murmur of appreciation from the room at the Lamingtons. Malie turned her head slightly to look at me. Not the 7-minute 4-second look, a different one, earlier, a smaller one, and I raised my eyebrows, and she smiled, the Lamington smile, which is the smile she uses when Australia is being exactly as Australian as Australia is, a smile that is fond and slightly incredulous, and that smile I am not examining. I know what that smile is. It belongs to a person who is charmed by the country she has chosen, and charmed is the right word for the right reason, and I am keeping that smile separately from the other one. Inside, the chamber held perhaps 60 people and their guests across 5 rows of chairs. There were families with children, an elderly Filipino man with what appeared to be his entire extended family, a young woman from somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, who cried from the moment the registrar began speaking and showed no interest in stopping, which I found moving, and several people who appeared to be alone, which I found more moving. Malie sat in row 4. Sophie and I sat in row 5, directly behind her. The registrar was a trim man in his late 50s, who had clearly done this many times, and who nonetheless managed to make the words sound considered rather than procedural, and the words are remarkable if you let them be. The commitment to Australia and its people, to uphold its values, to obey its laws, to exercise the rights and duties of a citizen. Malie said them clearly and without error, which she would, because she had the flashcards and the perfect test score. When the anthem played, she sang it, quietly, reading the words from the printed sheet they had handed out, though I think she knew them, and in the 3rd line she looked for me over her shoulder. After the ceremony there was the morning tea with the Lamingtons, and this is the part I have thought about less than the video, and that I should think about more. We stood in the lobby for about 40 minutes, the 3 of us, and Malie spoke to the Filipino family, and to the young woman from sub-Saharan Africa, and to an elderly Italian couple who had been in Australia for 50 years, and were there for a grandchild's ceremony, and who seemed moved by everything, in a way that was slightly overwhelming, and also correct. She spoke to all of them with the easy warmth she deploys in rooms full of strangers, which is a skill I have never had, and have always relied on her to manage. Sophie ate 3 lamingtons. Malie took photographs of the certificate, which was presented in a folder with an embossed kangaroo, and she sent the photographs to her mother in Phrae, and to 2 friends in Melbourne, and to the women from the Osborne Park grocery, and her phone lit up with responses for about 20 minutes, which she showed me selectively, the ones from her mother, who had sent a photograph of herself holding a chicken in her yard, and a long message in Thai that Malie translated as roughly, "Your father would be proud." Her father had died in 2020, the first year of COVID, when the borders were closed and she could not go back. She told me this quietly, looking at the phone, and I put my hand on her back, and she leaned into it slightly, the lean that means received, and I think about that lean now. Both stories are present in that lean too. I am going to leave it alone. When the anthem played, she sang it, quietly, reading the words from the printed sheet they had handed out, though I think she knew them, and in the 3rd line she looked for me over her shoulder. I have described this already. 7 minutes and 4 seconds. The smile that lasted 2 seconds. What I have not yet described is what I was thinking when she found me, because I did not understand until later that this is the frame that matters. I was thinking, we made it. That is the exact thought, with a specific emotional content that I can only describe as the end of a long effort. The forms, the appointments, the bridging visa, the years, the waiting. We made it. I smiled back. She turned to the front. 42 days later, she told me the marriage was over. The separation conversation was on a Sunday evening in April, at the kitchen table, with the chili plant visible through the window, because it was that time of year when it fruits. She was calm and direct, which is how she handles things she has prepared for, and she told me that she had been unhappy for a while, and that she did not want to pretend otherwise, and that she thought it was better to be honest. I asked how long was a while, and she said she wasn't sure, which is the answer that I have found least resolvable, because it could mean 6 months, or it could mean 6 years, and the difference between those 2 numbers is almost the entire marriage. I asked whether there was someone else, and she said no, and I believe her, because it is a detail that a person who is being honest about the large thing would not lie about, and she was being honest about the large thing. I asked whether she was staying in Melbourne, and she said yes. She had a life here now, and I understood that, and I understand it still, and the understanding does not make it easier. She moved out in June 2024 to a flat in Coburg, with a Thai woman she had known from the grocery in Perth, which tells you that the planning was not entirely spontaneous, though I have since decided that planning is not the same as bad faith, and that a woman who plans a separation is simply a woman who takes seriously the responsibility of not being unprepared for consequences. I remained in the terrace house until August, when the lease ended, and then I moved into a serviced apartment in Carlton that costs $1,840 a week, and that I can afford on the superannuation and the asset sale and the memory of having managed a hardware distribution center for 22 years, which gave me skills that I cannot at the moment deploy for anything except moving between furnished accommodations efficiently. She moved out in June 2024 to a flat in Coburg with a Thai woman she had known from the grocery in Perth, which tells you that the planning was not entirely spontaneous, though I have since decided that planning is not the same as bad faith, and that a woman who plans a separation is simply a woman who takes seriously the responsibility of not being unprepared for consequences. I remained in the terrace house until August, when the lease ended, and then I moved into a serviced apartment in Carlton that costs $1,840 a week, and that I can afford on the superannuation and the asset sale, and the memory of having managed a hardware distribution center for 22 years. I want to give you the financial accounting, because I have not done it yet, and this category of story is not complete without it. The superannuation I had when Malie arrived in Australia in December 2018, approximately 450,000 Australian dollars. What I have now, approximately 270,000, after the legal separation costs, the Carlton apartment, the Fitzroy flat, and the 8 years of a married life in which I funded most things, because I earned most things, and this seemed correct. The marriage cost me about $180,000 over 8 years, which is roughly $22,000 a year, which is the cost of a moderately comfortable life in Perth, and which I would not characterize as extravagant for a marriage. There was no theft, there was no fraud, there was no legal claim she made on my assets. The separation was clean, amicably arranged, and she took what was hers and left what was mine, and the division was fair, and she had a lawyer, and so did I, and both lawyers said so. The $180,000 is what I spent on a married life, distributed across groceries and holidays and rent shares, and Dawa's school supplies, and the chili plant, and the Thai drama subscription, and a weekend in the Grampians in 2022 that was the best weekend of the last decade. The question of whether the $180,000 was the price of 8 genuine years or the cost of a pathway to a passport is the question I am carrying. I am going to give you the two stories, because this is the story of two stories, and I think you deserve both of them properly. The first story is this. A woman from Phrae, intelligent and capable, understood that marriage to an Australian was a pathway to the life she wanted, and she constructed that pathway carefully across 7 years, including the cooking class in Chiang Mai, and the Vegemite toast, and the Thai drama episodes, and the chili plant, and the flashcards, and the perfect citizenship test score, and 42 days after the ceremony that was the object of the pathway, she walked through the door the pathway had opened. The evidence for this story, the dates, October 2019 to March 2024, is 53 months, which is the exact minimum required for citizenship from the date of permanent residency, plus the application and processing time, minus a margin of 0. The separation conversation in April is 5 weeks after the ceremony. In 5 years of marriage, there was not one conversation that resembled the April one, not one signal of unhappiness that I would now characterize as genuine. The chili plant still has fruit on it. I bought it. The second story is this. A woman from Phrae fell genuinely in love, in a cooking class, over shared cutting boards, with a widower from Perth who made her laugh by failing at the knife technique, and she built a life with him in 2 Australian cities, and learned his country's history in 6 weeks of earnest study, and sang its anthem in a council chamber in March. And somewhere between the ceremony and the April evening, she understood that the life had stopped fitting, and she told him, because she is a person who tells the truth about the things that matter. The evidence for this story, the Vegemite toast, which nobody learns to make for a man if they are merely managing him, the 30 episodes of Thai drama she watched with me, the friendship between Dao and me, which a woman running a pathway would have no particular reason to encourage, Nathan and Maya's dinner table, the way she said we made it in the car park, which I heard, and which she did not have to say, the fact that in the April conversation, when I asked whether it was the citizenship, she said she did not understand what I meant. The second story is this. A woman from Phrae fell genuinely in love, in a cooking class, over shared cutting boards, with a widower from Perth who made her laugh by failing at the knife technique, and she built a life with him in 2 Australian cities, and learned his country's history in 6 weeks of earnest study, and sang its anthem in a council chamber in March, and somewhere between the ceremony and the April evening, she understood that the life had stopped fitting, and she told him, because she is a person who tells the truth about the things that matter. The evidence for this story, the Vegemite toast, which nobody learns to make for a man if they are merely managing him, the 30 episodes of Thai drama she watched with me, the friendship between Dao and me, which a woman running a pathway would have no particular reason to encourage, Nathan and Maya's dinner table, the way she said we made it in the car park, which I heard, and which she did not have to say, the Helen's mug washed and returned to the cabinet without comment, the Coburg Hills Hoist Division of Labor, the Sunday mornings, and the news from Bangkok, the Grampians weekend. And one more thing, which I have been carrying separately from the others, and which I am going to include now, because I think it is the most convincing single piece of evidence for the second story, and because I have held it back, and the holding back is its own kind of dishonesty. In December 2023, 3 months before the ceremony, she renewed the lease on the Coburg house for another 12 months. She could have let it lapse. She renewed it. A woman with a clear exit plan does not renew a lease for 12 months 3 months before the ceremony. That is either the best piece of evidence I have for the second story, or it is the act of a woman who was being very careful not to leave evidence for the first. I cannot decide which, and I have been deciding for 14 months, and I am going to stop deciding now. She said she did not understand what I meant. I have spent 14 months with that sentence. It is consistent with the first story, a person who does not want to confirm a plan. It is equally consistent with the second, a person who genuinely had not connected those two dates into a proposition. I cannot distinguish between the two using any tool available to me, and I have used all the tools I have, and I have several, and none of them has produced a result. Sophie came to the Carlton apartment in June and sat across from me and asked the direct question that she had been not asking for 2 months. "Dad, do you think she played you?" And I gave her the only honest answer, which is that I think she might have, and I also think she might not have, and that I have no way of knowing, and that both of those things are simultaneously true, and that one of them will remain true forever. Sophie held my hand for a while, and then she said the thing that daughters of analytical fathers say, which is that she was sorry he had to live with a question he couldn't answer, and I said that I had been in business for 36 years, and I was used to questions I couldn't answer, and she said that wasn't the same, and she was right. Nathan took it differently. He went quiet for about a week, and then sent me a message that said he had been thinking about it, and that he thought the answer didn't actually matter, and I asked him what he meant, and he said that the years were real regardless. The cooking, the drama, the citizenship study, even if it was planned, the living of it was real, and he had eaten at that table, and he could tell the difference between real and performed, and what he had seen at that table was real. He might be right. He might be constructing a kindness. I have decided to let both of those be true as well, because I am 67 years old, and the quarantine between the true and the kind has started to seem like a luxury I can no longer afford. I watch the video. I watch it for the smile. I am looking for the tell that would show me which story the smile belongs to. The practiced reassurance of a woman 8 weeks from her exit, or the unself-conscious warmth of a woman turning to share the moment with the man she loves. I have watched it 47 times. The smile does not resolve. It is 2 seconds of a woman's face in a council chamber in March, and it belongs to both stories equally, and I have begun to think that this is not a failure of my analysis. I think it might be the truth of it. I think both stories might have been happening in the same face at the same time, and the smile was both of them at once. And the reason I cannot read it is not that I lack the skill. It is that the smile was true, and the truth had 2 answers, and it was always going to be unresolvable. And the 47 viewings were the right number, because there was no number at which it would have resolved, and I have finished counting now. The video will not change. The smile is what it is. I am going to put the laptop away. James is on Thursday. That is what is next. I am still in Melbourne. I have not gone back to Perth because Perth is still Helen's Perth, and Melbourne is now Malie's Melbourne, and I am a man who seems to end up in cities that belong to women he loved, which is either a habit or a homing instinct, and I have decided not to examine it too closely. Let me tell you about the grandson, because he is the most unambiguous thing in my life, and unambiguous things are valuable at 67. Nathan and Maya named him James. He was born in September 2024, 6 months after the separation conversation, and I was at the hospital at 2 in the morning holding a coffee from a vending machine that tasted of warm water with opinions, and when Nathan brought him out to show me, wrapped, red-faced, making the specific noise of a person who has just arrived somewhere they did not choose and are registering their feelings about it, I thought about 4 things in the same moment, which is unusual for me. I thought about Helen, who did not live to see this. I thought about Nathan, who was 38 and exhausted, and the most certain I had ever seen him look. I thought about Malie, who had brought me here, not to this hospital at 2 in the morning, but to this city, to this version of my son's life, to this moment, because without the Chiang Mai trip and the cooking class and the 7 years, I would not have moved to Melbourne, and Nathan would not have followed his firm here, and this baby would have been born in Perth, and I would have been in Perth for it, not in the corridor of a Melbourne hospital at 2 in the morning, with a coffee that tasted like warm opinions. And then I stopped thinking, because Nathan put James in my arms, and he was warm, and he was heavy, in the specific way that newborns are heavy, which is the way that only living things can be heavy, and I stood there in a hospital corridor in Melbourne, and held my first grandchild, and none of the other things I had been thinking continued to matter for that minute, and the minute lasted as long as it needed to. He is 4 months old now. He has Nathan's nose, and what I believe to be Helen's hands, which is impossible to verify because babies' hands all look the same, but which I am choosing to believe, because I would like something of Helen to have continued, and this seems like a reasonable fiction to maintain. On Thursdays, I go to Nathan and Maya's flat in Northcote, which is 3 tram stops from mine, and I hold James for 3 hours, while Nathan works from home in the other room, and Maya sleeps, because Maya has not slept properly since September, and 3 hours on Thursday mornings is what Nathan and I agreed I could reliably offer. During those 3 hours, James is usually asleep for about half of them, and during the sleeping half I sit in the chair by the window and look at him and think about the question that has been my companion since April, and for those 90 minutes or so the question recedes, not because it resolves, but because it becomes irrelevant in the presence of something that is entirely present tense, and I have found that irrelevance is sometimes what resolution looks like when you are 67. I am still in Melbourne. I have a flat in Fitzroy now, smaller than the Carlton apartment, and I have a good Vietnamese place on the corner, and a bookshop nearby, and the state library which I go to on Thursdays, and which does not require me to be anybody's anything, which is restful. Sophie comes up from Geelong about once a month. Nathan and Maya had a baby in September, a boy, and I am a grandfather, which is a word I keep trying on at different times of day to see which way it fits, and most of the time it fits badly, and occasionally in the early mornings when I am holding him and he is asleep, it fits perfectly. That is the ratio. Most of the time badly, occasionally perfectly. It seems like the right ratio for a man of 67 in a city that is not his. I do not know whether Malay is happy in Coburg. I hope she is. That is not a performance of generosity. I have noticed, in myself, a genuine hope that she is well, and that the life she has built is the life she wanted, whether or not the building of it came at the cost I paid for it. I have looked, once, at her social media, because I am human, and she was at a Thai food festival in the city with women I recognized from the Osborne Park grocery, and she looked well, and I closed the tab, and I have not looked again. The video is enough. The video is more than enough. I have 47 viewings of her face at the moment she became Australian, and I am going to stop counting, not because the counting is wrong, but because it is finished, and the video is not going to change, and the smile is not going to resolve, and there is a baby in Fitzroy who needs me on Thursday mornings, in the specific way that babies need people, completely, immediately, without history, and that is a different kind of answer to the question, and it will do.